Every young lawyer wanting to aspire to great heights of the profession, I think should always look for good lawyers to work under. And these days, mental wellness is being emphasized as something to look into. If they burnt out, they will leave the profession. A great lawyer, you ask him, did you automatically become a great lawyer? Of course not. When I came from law school, we hardly knew anything. The Catholic Church in Singapore was being sued by this Indian lady who had gone to the church in the middle of the night to pray. And then later, she fell into some sort of a trance, and she then writhed on the ground like a snake. And later, she stood up and marched like a soldier.
Hi everyone, today we are joined by Jimmy Yim, Senior Counsel, a true titan of commercial litigation in Singapore and quite literally one of the people who helped framing the playbook. If Singapore's legal community is starring a blockbuster movie, then Jimmy would be easily the lead actor. And beyond the courtroom drama, he has been steady captain at Drew Napier, actually navigating the firm through technological disruptions and global change. So buckle up, settle in, because today we'll be deep diving not just the high profile cases but also insights, stories, and how this journey has been so far. So thank you so much, Jimmy, for joining us today. And before we deep dive into some of the landmark moments in your legal career, I would love to hear how it all started. And was there a moment of experience that made you think that this is what I want?
That's a very good and interesting question for me to go back into the years. So in the 70s, I was born in Malaysia, raised in Malaysia. In the 70s, Malaysia was experiencing great political changes. And that I felt that the only way that I could be of any relevance to all those changes, and some of which were not nice at all to ethnic Chinese people, was to have a study of the law, because that's the rule of the game. The engagement is in the law. As you can see, Parliament is always populated by congressmen who are lawyers by background. And that's how I got into the law.
Was there any moment where you felt that this is too much of pressure?
I don't think there was a moment when I felt I had chosen the wrong career. I think the only time I felt that I could have done more was maybe I should have reached out to a larger audience and not just to one judge or 3 arbitrators or a court of appeal of 5. I think sometimes all of us in our idealism feel that we have a message for more than just a small group of people. We want to proclaim it loud, so to speak.
Right. So, Jimmy, the legal world today is very different from when you started. So, what is that one change which has surprised you, that this change has taken legal fraternity or the legal profession to another game?
I would say that there are two changes in our world over the last 4 decades that have made such a big difference to shaping our world to what it is. One is, I think, population explosion. At that time, I remember in the 80s, the world population was 4 billion people. Today is over 7 billion people, so almost twice. And when you have an increase in people, there are just increments in everything, in demand, in supply, in needs, right? And the second great change was technology, the exploding knowledge in our world. And that also caused a tremendous change and impact in the way we live, work, play, and the way we present our cases in court. I remember the time when I began practice. We had just moved into the new technology of photocopying.
Hmm.
And what we
Right.
accept today as a norm, it was in the 80s a new technology, and we were surprised to receive uh, information or instructions and advice from British QCs on printed paper that was so full as compared to telegrams. And that had been the form of technology. Telegrams have been the technology for 150 years until the 80s.
Right, right,
Yes.
right.
Now, today, look at what we are having today. Today, my goodness, we keep information in the cloud. We send large reams of documents and put it in drop boxes. And we are communicating with people around the world and on the other side of the globe instantaneously. There is no lag time. Zoom hearings are common.
Right.
Yeah, there's just a whole sea change of things brought about because of technology. And also because of technology, the demands on our professional work is much more. You know, when the Japanese entrepreneurs started the convenience store called 7-Eleven, it sounded such a catchy word. But today, lawyers are not just 7-Eleven. Lawyers today are 24/7, available 24 hours, all 7 days of the week because of the emails, the WhatsApp, social media. Clients expect an instantaneous response.
Right. And do you think that for I just want to understand how do you use technology for the best in the best manner? How technology has helped you in the profession? Zoom calls, I understand now you don't have
Yes.
to travel, but what else?
So now the latest thing is, of course, AI, right?
Yeah.
AI is now helping us to draft documents, pleadings, help us to analyze complex facts, summarize it for us. AI is used to record interviews. AI is probably now going to be used very soon by many courts to record evidence and summarize them for the judges, and maybe even draft the first cut of the judgment or award. So I think, and this is the remarkable thing about human beings, because in every generation, there are going to be challenges that are new to that generation, and there will be new inventions that will come about, and each generation will adapt to these new technological tools. So I remember that, uh, you know, my grandfather couldn't handle a remote control of a television set. You can imagine that, right? But today, my sons can handle so many things on the computer that leaves me wondering if I am no longer relevant, as they say, as a dinosaur. But of course, we all use emails. We all use these forms of technology that are easily accessible. But speaking as an older person, I cannot claim that I could be as tech savvy as a young 22-year-old.
Do you think AI has become a threat, or it is seen as a helpful tool? Do you think that AI is replacing the humans?
Right. That's a commonly asked question. And the way I look at AI, as the way I looked at all technologies that come into our world, is that there is always a plus and a minus. Right.
Yes.
The plus is that AI, first and foremost, have two aspects that uh, is like the human mind. First, it stores knowledge. And I think our ability to store knowledge is somewhat limited by circumstances, by demands, and of course, we have a limited amount of capacity to remember. And that ability to recall actually is always challenged as we grow older, and it's a natural thing. The AI as a form of a machine doesn't have that hindrance or difficulty. So they can store tons and tons of information, right? It's unlimited. The second thing is the ability to analyze. The AI can analyze these days as well as human beings. So you would have heard that AI tools have now been used to challenge, uh, to pass law exams, and they've proven to be just as good as top students. AI is used to play chess games against grandmasters and prove to be able to beat them at it, right? But the one thing that AI doesn't have is that human ability of judgment, the wisdom of judgment, that sometimes not necessarily what appears to be rationally the best decision is the best, necessarily the best, but the better decision. So that judgment that human beings have is a gift that is developed over time and experience.
Maybe in next 10 years, AI will reach to that level as well. Because we have never expected that
Yes.
we will reach to this place.
The second thing that AI doesn't have is empathy,
Yes.
right? The human emotion. And talking about human emotion, human beings are a very unique and the most unique, rather, of all species on this great planet. Uh, we have, but we are driven by emotions. If you'd be surprised, but everything, if you think about it, is we're driven by emotions, and the AI doesn't have that. Will it be able to develop that? I don't know. It may be. Of course, we always see how Hollywood takes us ahead in time. When Hollywood talks about going to the moon, we've gone to the moon. Talks about going to the stars, we are now trying to get to the stars, right? Living in space, yes, we are doing that too. Flying cars, in the Jacksons cartoon, we're doing it now, right? So it may be, it may be. But at this moment in human history, we still have an advantage over the machine. And it shouldn't be seen as a battle against the machine. It should be seen that this is a tool that human beings have invented to make our lives better, like all the other tools. I mean, think about it. The simple contraption of a car, motor car, right? Before you have motor cars, we have to go back to horse carriages, which was an improvement from riding a horse, right? But look at what cars bring today, problems of pollution, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
But on the other hand, it has convenience that you can't imagine without a car. So, as with all forms of technology, there are always going to be some negative aspects of it, and human beings, in their ingenuity and resilience, will always learn how to temper them down. Right? So I'm an optimist. I don't see machines entirely replacing us. I don't like to believe that the Terminator series with Arnold Schwarzenegger will come to life in the sense that we will be fighting against the machines for survival.
Right.
Right.
That's a great point. Jimmy, even the best lawyers face moments of uncertainty. Can you recall some of that moment from your life where you felt out of depth, and how did you overcome, or what did you learn from that?
Okay, I think drawing from my own experience, yes, I think in the early days of practice, it is not uncommon for young lawyers to experience great anxiety in their work, a great anxiety in trying to meet clients' expectations or predicting the outcome of cases, and at the same time overwhelmed with the amount of work. I think that kind of problem is not unusual, particularly when you're trying to do a good job, because if you don't care, then those problems don't appear.
Right.
But I think the antidote to that is really being involved with senior lawyers in teams where you are being led. And so I can't overemphasize this, that for a young lawyer, it's very important to work under uh, good lawyers or grandmasters, and it's true. You look over time, a great lawyer. You ask him, "Did you automatically become a great lawyer?" Of course not. When I came from law school, we hardly knew anything. There's a very vast chasm between the study of law and the practice of law. It's a very vast chasm, and how do we get there to overcome these big gaps? When we didn't have the experience. That usually is traced back to the early years when we were led by hand uh, by senior lawyers who guided us. So that's why we are emphasizing the need for good mentors, you know. And every young lawyer wanting to aspire to great heights of the profession, I think should always look for good lawyers to work under. And then at some point, as the old Chinese saying goes, you know, when the student is ready and with his skills developed, then he's ready to descend the hill.
Right,
Right.
right. What do we have to say? There are debates going on the hard work versus work-life balance. So,
Yes.
what do you have to say on it?
Yes, yes. I think work-life balance is very important, uh, primarily because the practice of law isn't a short sprint of just a few years or even 2 decades. I mean, I've practiced now for 42 years, and I'm not ready to give it up yet. You know, I'm still at it, and it still excites me. It still gets me up in the morning, gets me thinking over at night, keeps me up. So I don't see myself stopping, and I'm not alone. There are many lawyers practicing way into their 70s and 80s even, right? And so because it is a long marathon of a career, it's important to be able to pace it. That pacing, like running a race or a marathon, that pacing is work-life balance.
But it has
And
been,
let me explain why.
yeah,
Because if you have a burnt out, as people do have, they have burnt out, and these days mental wellness is being emphasized as something to look into. If they burnt out, they will leave the profession. They leave their job. Or sometimes when they work to the exclusion of being happy in their private lives, I mean, their children don't get to see them, or their spouses have differences with them and said, you're not the man I married anymore, you know, or you're not the woman I married anymore. I mean, that leads to unhappiness in their private lives. And you can't help it, but if someone is unhappy in his private life, it will have an impact in his professional life as well. So that's why work life balance is so important.
but in this competitive world where uh, we have been advised that initial years of your profession you have to sacrifice your personal life and only focus on your professional life, and there cannot be any work life balance because you're thriving for success, and it's not easy.
Right. Okay, if you're saying that when we're younger we take less holidays and when we get older we get longer holidays, I agree with you entirely. But you still need to give the younger ones their holidays, their break. You know. So in the case of my practice at Drew Napier, and as many as 10 to 12 lawyers work with me in my own team. Uh, when we are on a case, we work through the whole weekend. Right? Nobody takes an issue to say, I'm not coming back to work, you know. Of course, these days with Zoom facilities, we can also talk and discuss matters over Zoom. But at the end of the day, nobody shirks responsibility because they're in the team fighting together. And nothing builds camaraderie as strong and well as when you're fighting together in the trenches, so to speak. Right?
Right.
So, but that doesn't mean that we have to put them through it every week. So there may be trials that may last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but after that, we give them a break. I take a break. I tell them to take a break, you know, before we start another case. So that need to have a return back to a more leisurely life is necessary, both for one's own mental wellness as well as for one's private life needs.
Hmm. Perfect. I think that's a great advice for the young lawyers because, and also for everyone, where on one hand, employers are asking that you have to give up your personal life and focus only on work. But I think yes, the burnout and the hustle culture we are living in, uh, people there are people who leave the profession because uh, they can't bear it. They can't
Yes.
manage it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me add a little footnote there. I think it's important for the older lawyers, the mentors and the partners, to be able to tell the younger ones a few things to reassure them. First, that they need to acknowledge the sacrifice of time and effort and long hours the young ones putting in.
Yes.
I mean, when a younger lawyer feels that he's appreciated, that goes some way. Secondly, I think there's a need to reassure them, look, I'm not going to have you do this every weekend because I really want you to also, have your own private time. And so when this is over, I want you to take your break and holiday, right?
Right.
And third, what we do these days is we take our lawyers for trips. We take our lawyers out to dinners. We socialize with them in a way that wasn't the practice that I had when we were growing up in the early years of our practice. It wasn't common for teams of lawyers to go away to an overseas trip or to huddle together off to dinner with the senior partners. That might happen over just a Christmas lunch, but it wasn't a regular occurrence. But these days, it's a regular occurrence.
Right.
And I think I took a page of that from the Japanese culture. When I was a young lawyer in the 80s, I went to Japan to do a number of cases. And I noticed that the Japanese had this sense of being in a group that was so distinctly different from the other nationalities or countries that I visited. One is that every morning before the start of the day, they were huddled, or at the start of the day, they were huddled together in discussions as to what they need to do together, and each being delegated different tasks. And then they may have a similar session like that at the end of the week. Right? I thought that that's a wonderful thing to do. And they call it quality control circles.
Nice.
And that led to me having team meetings in my work. So I regularly have team meetings with my lawyers. And there we talk about our work, but we throw in this as well. We also talk about what we do socially, right? And so that adds on that human element to it.
Right.
Right.
That's
Then the second thing that I learned from the Japanese there was that they would go out in the evenings and eat and drink together. That is a very common culture the Japanese had, and I don't know how long they've had it, post-war presumably. And again, that wasn't prevalent in Singapore in the 80s, but today it's very common in Singapore. And I'm sure it is common too in India.
Right.
And that's a good thing.
Right. Right.
Because it bands people together. And so that's why we have this, sounds rather cliche to say this, but you need to work hard together and play hard together.
Yes, absolutely.
You know?
That's a fantastic advice. Coming back to your courtroom experiences, so do you have any cases or verdicts that made you pause and realize that this is more than just a client and this case could change the law itself? Do you have any story of any particular case?
Oh, wow. Okay. I've had quite a few of those cases. One of which led to a change in the law in terms of how we looked at it. So this took place in the 90s. At that time in England, the courts had developed a principle in tort law that if you are claiming in tort law for pure economic loss, and that is, in other words, no physical injury. Let's say, you have built a building and that the people who are suing the developers of the building are not the buyers from the developer, because if they're the buyers from the developer, they have a contract. These are the subsequent owners. They had been subsequent buyers. They bought from the early buyers. So it's a contract, 2 contracts down. Right? And so if they wanted to claim against a developer, their claim, let's say, for something defective of the building, that is a pure economic loss claim. And the English courts have developed the principle that in pure economic loss claims, there are severe limitations. You need to prove a certain degree of proximity because, there is no direct relationship of a contract between the claimant and the defendant. And when we had a case of water seepage and water ponding in a major condominium development in Singapore, and I was instructed by the management corporation to sue the developer and the architect, I was confronted with that difficult principle of law. And I argued it at the court of first instance, which I won, and then on appeal, I also argued the appeal. And I likened it to why we should succeed to the case of an unborn child. I said, if you think of it, if a doctor has a malpractice in the way he had somehow been negligent in his looking after a pregnant woman and had affected the fetus. When the fetus become a human being, an adult, and the fetus wants to, that young person wants to sue, right? He wasn't the one who instructed the doctor, right? So there is no contract between them. But clearly, whatever the doctor did impacted on that child. And so I use that principle to say that even though the management corporation wasn't born at the time when the developer was building the building, this is not very different. So the sheer logic of it is that whatever the developer did, right, it would impact on the management corporation that would one day be formed. And so therefore, the developer owed a direct duty of care.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And another argument I made was that, look, Singapore is so small. We're filled with buildings. So if you don't find this principle in our client's favor, can you imagine what developers will get away with, right?
Right.
So sometimes we call it a policy argument, right? To say that you look at it, the circumstances of the situation in the country or in the territory, that you need to make this policy to protect the greater interests of others who may not be in the suit, but who will be impacted by it.
Right. Did you succeed in?
Oh, yes, I did.
Oh,
I did.
lovely.
Yes. There's another case that was also fascinating, and this was reported quite widely at that time when it happened. The Catholic Church in Singapore was being sued by this Indian lady who had gone to the church in the middle of the night to pray. And then later, she fell into some sort of a trance, and she then writhed on the ground like a snake. And later, she stood up and marched like a soldier. And her daughter and her son ran to the priest and asked the priest to save their mother because she was possessed. And so the priest, in the goodness of their heart, took this Indian lady into a prayer room, and it wasn't a very large room, a room about the size of this room. And there, with the help of some other parishioners who were praying that evening, sought to conduct an exorcism ceremony on her to cast the devil out of her, so to speak, right? Because she was behaving in a very strange way. You know, she was mouthing, breathing, and then yet at times she was lucid. And it was something straight out of the movie The Exorcist.
Understood.
Right.
Understood.
And they were doing the session for a good 2 hours, and then at one point, she seemed to have a lucid moment, and then she went in to ask to relieve herself, and a parishioner accompanied her. In the meantime, her 2 children were kept out of the room. And then when she came back into the room, after that toilet break, she then suddenly seemed to have woken up and said, what was she doing there? And so the priest said, well, you were under some sort of spell, and we were trying to help you. And then she looked at herself and said, did you all apply pressure on me? Because then she saw that there were some marks on her body. That was due to them holding her down when she was struggling, you know.
Yes.
She was struggling against the prayers as if she was seriously possessed by some devil who refused to be. So on the face of it, she seemed to have woken up, and she seems to feel deeply offended that she was put through something that she didn't know what happened. And then she went off, and so the priest and all the parishioners said, oh gosh, I hope we've helped her. And so thought that the evening was over. Then what she did was she then went on to the nearby public hospital, and there she got examined by the accident emergency department, and they took pictures of all the bruises on her legs and that she was in a disheveled state. The next thing she did was that she then went to consult the psychiatrist in the public hospital, and our public hospitals are very good. They have all these services. And the psychiatrist from the public hospital, and they were learned psychiatrists, one of them bore the title professor, concluded that she suffered from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which was first identified as a mental illness from the soldiers that left the Vietnam War, the American soldiers. They went back to America, and even in the quiet of their home, in the middle of the night, they would be screaming and shouting, relieving in their mind. So this woman was showing the signs of PTSD, the incident that was so traumatic on her that night in the church, that she continued to live with these traumatic incidents in her head.
Yeah.
And so she sued the church and 9 others, the parishioners. And again, I was called into service, and again, I did it on a pro bono basis. The trial lasted 46 days.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And what was the outcome of it?
Okay, so what we did was she was actually out to angle the church for a settlement. She figured that if she sued so many people, right, merely just the cost of defending the suit would have gone into millions. And if she thought that if each of them were to just pay 50 to 100,000, she would make anything of $500,000 to $1 million in settlement.
Right.
And so her lawyers asked for a settlement. And you can imagine the church was deeply troubled by it, because there would be one quarter within the church to say, let's just pay her and get off with this. We don't need the publicity. Then there was another quarter that said, but we didn't do anything wrong. This is an entrapment, right? This was a scam, right? A complex one, but a scam nonetheless. So my clients were the priest, and I told the priest that in my experience, sometimes there are just dark clouds over our head, that battles that we did not intend to fight, but were trusted upon us to fight, And I said, this is one of them for you. You just have to fight them.
Yeah.
So they gave me that green light to go ahead and defend it. What we did was we then hired private investigators and trailed her. She went to the public hospitals for her consultation. She was dressed in drabby clothes, looking forlorn and quite sick. But then we also filmed her on occasions when she wasn't going to the hospital visits. She was in the gym, she was in the coffee shop, she was drinking alcohol, right? And so we went to trial.
Yeah.
And I basically produced the evidence to show that she was malingering. In plain terms, she was play acting, and she was a great actress, because they really believed at that time she was possessed.
Yeah.
She displayed all the signs of someone that something else had taken over her mind and her body.
Yeah.
Right. But what stood against me were the testimony of 2 government psychiatrists from the government hospitals who affirmed that she suffered from PTSD. And so in the claim for PTSD, it's quite simple. Regardless of whether she was or was not malingering, the point was that the priest had put her through that incident, and that incident had led to her having continuous nightmares.
Oh.
Right? So we had a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so it was necessary to be able to somehow get the testimony of the psychiatrist to be reversed.
Right.
So in our evidence, as is the international arbitration, the evidence in chief is produced by way of affidavits or sworn statements. So these two government psychiatrists have produced written statements against her, against my client, in favor of her. So in the cross-examination, I took the first government psychiatrist, who was a very senior psychiatrist, through it, the evidence very carefully, and then I showed him the video, and I showed him all that. And I said, look, you're obviously not aware when you wrote your report, right, as to what her behavior was when she was lucid. And then I put him through 2.5 days of cross-examination, after which, in one morning when he came back to testify, he said this, to the laughter of the entire court. He said, I'm going through PTSD myself thanks to the cross-examination of Mr. Yim. I couldn't sleep the whole night, he said. But at the end, he conceded that he might have been led on. And it was a very embarrassing thing for him, because he was a senior psychiatrist. Yeah. In other words, he got hoodwinked in his consultations. And this wasn't just one consultation. This was a series of consultations before they came to that view. Right. So then when it came to the second government psychiatrist, the job was a lot easier. When I had the first psychiatrist. Yeah. And the second psychiatrist was actually a student of the first psychiatrist. Right. And she'd gone to another public hospital. And then I said, well, you know, given all this, would you like to reconsider your evidence? And I think after a few rounds of sparring with her, she came to the view that, yes, I think we might have been hoodwinked. Right. And so the judgment was delivered in favor, dismissing the case.
Very interesting case. Yeah. Very interesting. I really enjoyed the story.
Well, I've had quite a number of such interesting cases that had an impact in the direction of the law over the years. And I have been very happy that I've had that privilege of being able to make those arguments. Because if you don't get that brief, you don't get a chance to make it. So it's a privilege to be able to be involved.
Absolutely, and challenging the law itself. I think navigating them to change the law and see the other perspective. I think that's the art of a great lawyer. Like,
well, actually, there are lawyers and there are lawyers, but I think if one understands the purpose and original purpose and meaning of what law is, it is not difficult to extrapolate arguments. The whole purpose of the law is ultimately to help people live in an orderly society so that we will have peace and security, which are the two essential ingredients in order for human beings to function, live, and prosper. Peace and security. So things that do not improve peace and security, that do not improve a sense of justice between people, justness between people, if there are such laws, then they need to be rewritten. Right? And there are a fair bit of unjust laws in this world, and the reason for unjust laws that exist comes down to the way laws are made. Laws are made by Parliament, by Congress, of people voted into power, and usually there will be a dominant leader or party that spearheads the way the law moves, even if it is objected to by the minority. But their purpose for the law may not necessarily be the better purpose for everybody.
Right.
And with time, sometimes circumstances, social circumstances change. Those laws need to be changed too.
True, and it's the duty of the lawyers probably to guide them well, because they understand, and especially seeing the client perspective and everything. I think they are better. They can fight that in court.
Yes. So the fight is actually at several levels. At the least level, in my view, is in the courts, because although it's very powerful, but you don't always get an opportunity to get the right lawyer to fight the case, right, on something like that. But I think in India you do. You you have a lot of interesting constitutional cases,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
We don't, not in my experience. But at another level is in Congress or in Parliament where you debate these things. And the third level is actually the level of activists. These days, there are a lot of NGOs that are activists.
Right. True.
Yes. And I think at every level you can see you need people who are versed in the law as to how it is made and how it ought to be redrafted or changed. And so that's why the study of law is so important.
Right. So,
And so, this message to all the young lawyers, in my view, all of you can make a difference to your country.
that's amazing advice. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for this. You are leading a law firm and bringing change. Uh, and what philosophies and what policies you have put in place in Drew and Napier, which you can actually share it aloud that other firms can also implement those policies, which are bringing change, be it in terms of workplace policy, be it uh, in terms of how you're dealing with clients, what kind of policies, and also as how you want to showcase that you are the leader, and how did you manage it all?
Right. Okay. So, we need to break it down. Uh, Ultimately, to run a successful law firm, uh, which work is primarily to advise clients uh, on how to navigate the law satisfactorily, to help him reach an outcome in respect of where legal issues are involved. There are broadly two parts to analyze. One is from the standpoint of the people who are going to help you deliver those services. They are your lawyers, your secretaries, your clerks. In my view, you need to treat them well. You need to pay them fair wages, commensurate with the market. You need to look after their mental wellness and balance. These days, you need to take them on holidays too and have dinners with them. You need to treat them as family,
Yeah.
for short of word. They need to feel. And I say this in all honesty, that the best hours of each day for most of us are spent in the office, in an office environment with our lawyers and staff. So we should make the best of it in terms of doing a good job together and treating each other well. So therefore, policies like anti-harassment and things that are negative will have to be implemented strictly. No one should be bullying the younger ones or doing things that are not acceptable, that disrupts that harmony and working together. So that's the one part. How we deal with our lawyers. We send them away sometimes for secondments, send them away on overseas studies if needs to, right? And we don't throw them into the deep end. We lead them gently into deeper and deeper areas of complex disputes. I mean, I've had young lawyers come from other firms joining Drew and Napier on a lateral basis, meaning not from pupillage. And sometimes I'm aghast that they tell me that the partners guiding them did not provide any form of guidance, and they were just left at the deep end. I say, well, that makes them first very worried about what to do, right? And secondly, they're not learning from anyone more senior. Instead, they're just learning from themselves, right? So that's not very satisfactory in my view. So that need to help our younger ones in that process of mentoring them into more complex disputes, complex situations, always there to be there for them, to guide them. I think it's very important.
Right.
Then on the side of clients, now there, the relationship between a lawyer and a client is one of the most special, unique relationship, because it isn't just anyone selling a product or a service. Um, Although we say we deliver legal services, uh, the way the relationship develop and the way the law accords that relationship is to treat it as one where the client need to be completely upfront with you with the facts of the case, and sometimes personal details of his life, right? And so because of that, the lawyer needs to protect with great confidence all these very private matters of the client. So that developed the client lawyer relationship and the duty of confidentiality, and from it, the privilege that attaches to that relationship. And so when you recognize that you are in a special, unique situation with your client, and that he reposed this trust and confidence in you, there is this need for you to be completely loyal to his cause. So that develops the duty of loyalty.
Right.
Right. And in order to discharge that well, a client must feel that he can trust his lawyer completely and implicitly. And that lawyer must never abuse that trust.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine a situation? I give you just the other end of it, okay, from which sometimes interesting novels are written. If a lawyer, in the course of negotiating a merger acquisition, wanted to be naughty, to play dirty, it is only so easy. He just needs to contact the other side on the side,
Right.
tell him what the bottom line is on the terms of the deal, right? Be paid silently,
Right.
betray his client, right?
Right.
It is so easy, right?
Yes.
But can you imagine what abhorrence the public will have when this is discovered? How it will impact on the rest of the profession? We can't trust our lawyers, right?
Right.
Now, when that trust is gone in a relationship, that's the end of that. Okay, that lawyer has to be disciplined, and disciplined very severely. So, in Singapore, the court of three judges will, without any doubt, strike that lawyer off the rolls. He can't practice. And that need to discipline lawyers is very important. It's part of that safeguard to, on the one hand, holding up the privilege that lawyers have, the unique position, and on the other hand, that if he falls away from not observing this very important principles, he cannot be allowed to practice. Can you imagine if that is not looked after in one case and is infected, then there are more and more such cases discovered. Before you know it, nobody will have any trust in the law at all. Right? And so, if I may draw an analogy from this as a topical event, if you look at what's happening around the world, the protests by the young people, right? And you know, their protests in Indonesia, and now recently in Nepal.
Nepal, yeah.
This loss of trust and confidence in the government is actually not an overnight matter. It is an infestation that has crept in a long time, and it's breeding and breeding and growing until the point it erupts into some violence, which is a shame.
But
It should
burning
never have
someone
happened.
alive, this is the, I think, the threshold of patience
Yeah.
and humanity has completely gone below the line. Like they burnt someone alive.
Yes.
So I don't think humanity cannot be this low.
Yes.
You cannot kill, no matter what the policy is, what is
Yes.
going around. You need to find the right ways to deal with it rather than killing someone. So,
Oh, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sanctioning in any way the wrongful act of violence by either side. You know, no violence is acceptable. Physical violence or destruction of property. What I meant to say is that you need to check uh, uh, every system needs to check things that may lead to disastrous results if not checked. That's
True.
my point.
True.
Yeah. So in the case of disciplining of lawyers, if it is not checked, it can lead to a loss of confidence in the profession and in the practice of law altogether.
Jimmy, last question. If you want to give last advice to young lawyers.
Okay, so I'll start with this. I'll start on the note that some of us are not necessarily meant to be lawyers, and I think one has to be honest about it. There are some of us who have studied the law because it might have been a glamorous thing to do. It might have been the one that it's nice to have, to be called a lawyer, or that our parents told us to do so. But we may have a leaning towards other things. I mean, I have seen lawyers who, instead of practicing, gone on to do business and gone on to do other things and do it very successfully. Some have even become great chefs. Right? And or artists. I think there's no shame in it at all.
We all have different callings.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no shame in it. And ultimately, if it is not for you, then find out what's for you. Right? So in order to determine whether it is for you, one has to know what it is. What does it take to be a lawyer, right? That can be sustained for a good number of years, and not just an overnight sensation. So a lawyer is someone who takes on the plight and legal problems of his client as his own to solve. It is really the work of someone who espouses the cause of another as close to his heart as his own. That sense of passion and loyalty to do the best for your client, that must be something that you inherently feel you want to do.
Right.
Some of us don't have it, and it's not unusual, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes some of us just don't have that need to have to fight for somebody else. But in plain terms, a lawyer advocates his client's cause, not his cause. But on the other hand, for those who have that sense that he lives to fight for a client's cause, and usually what inspires him is that he feels that his client has a righteous cause, meaning that if it is a claim, his client should deserve to recover monies to compensate a loss. Or if he's defending a client, that the client ought not to be put through, like in the case of the church, a scam like that, that the church should not have to settle monies to pay off a scam. Right? Then in every of these cases, he needs to do his best. And so to these lawyers, my advice to them is that there is so much you can do that will give you so much satisfaction that no other job or profession can possibly do that for you. And on top of that, towards, there will be the other rewards as well, of course, without more. There's financial reward, there is a sense of social acceptance, right? But beyond all that is one's personal satisfaction.
Right.
Of living a life that has made a difference to other people's lives.
That's beautifully said. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for giving your time. It was wonderful conversation. We enjoyed a lot.
Really?
Thank you so much.
I don't know about that.